John G. Jackson. Christianity before Christ, John G. Jackson. Pagan origins of the Christ myth, John G. Jackson. Or it's just so many tapes by Professor John Henry Clark. I even had some good ones, Moses and Akhenaten, one and the same, which leads us to some texts. The new one is used to be the House of the Messiah, talking about the historical evidence of King Tut being a form of Jesus. Later on now it's called Jesus in the House of the Pharaohs, Ahmed Osman. There's another book used to be Moses and Akhenaten, one and the same, but I think it's called now Moses and Akhenaten, Ahmed Osman. Books by Mustafa Gadala. His books, Hidden Wisdom, all types of hidden wisdom of ancient Hemmitt, as well as his book Tutankhamun, The Living House of the God of the Lord. There's so many books, you see, so many books. Thrice Great Hermes, G.R.S. Mead, Did Jesus Ever Live, G.R.S. Mead. Gnostic, Fragments of a Faith Forgotten, G.R.S. Mead. The Nag Hammadi Library, translated by James Robinson. The Gnostic Scriptures, Bentley Layton. The new book, The Gnostic Philosophy by Tobias Turton. Another book he had called The Gnostics. Excellent book, Kurt Rudolph's book, The Gnostics. One of the excerpts from the Nag Hammadi Library, which is The Gospel of Thomas by Harold Bloom. There's so many of these books, and I just want to just give the bibliography for people to try to understand, to dismantle these things, and try to understand that one thing, that all these Bible myths and Quran myths and Old Testament myths share the same thread of information with the rest of the world's mythology. So they're not exclusive groups that this thing just came and happened to. There's hundreds of parallels of Jesus and Horus, and hundreds, if not thousands, of Jesus and Krishna. And I can't think of the lady's name, the one that just put out the book, I think the year before last, Greatest Story Ever Sold. But her new one now, she has one out now on Jesus, Krishna, and maybe, I don't know the other, I don't know if she's talking about Horus or either Dionysus. But to give you an example, I'll run down a list of messiahs. There's Dionysus is a Christ figure. Jason is a Christ figure in the Greek mythology. Apollo is a Christ figure in the Greek mythology. Chrysalis is a Christ figure in the Greek mythology. Hercules is a Christ figure in the Greek mythology. I say the Greek mythology because that's the one that basically a lot of the Romans, who basically made Christianity a controlling religion of the state, basically borrowed heavily from the aspect of the Greeks, which we now know have their origins in African mythology. Other messiahs, as you know, Horus has multiple aspects. Khonsu in pre-dynastic aspect. Harakiti, which comes actually out of Ethiopia and later on translated into Atan, but Atan is a double composite figure as At and then Tan. It's a form of the mother Christ syndrome. Atan, Harkiti, Raheru Kahudi, Christ figures. Mithra, Christ figures. Vishnu, East India, Christ figure. Shiva, East India, Christ figure. As you know, Buddha, Christ figure. Abraxas, Gnostic God, Christ figure. The Gnostic Seth, Christ figure, identical with the third son of Adam in the Bible, is where it came from, but even linked to Set Typhon in the Egyptian mythology. Jean Duress, a papyrologist in the 1950s, connected connection with the Egyptian Seth, the biblical third son of Adam, Seth, and the Gnostic Seth. And the Gnostic Seth, which Seth is the only survivor beyond Hemmitt in the later mythologies, because his name is mentioned as one of the patriarch of one of the sons in the Bible. Also in the Bible, there's, I think it's in Matthew, one of those, you have Hermes, which is the Greek form for Tahuti. So Hermes is in there. You get the book, the Tanakh, which is a big, thick version of the Torah. The Tanakh, you will find tons of entities like Horus, forms of Isis or Aset. These things find themselves over and over again, and not to mention not only the gods, but there's 16 different forms of Osiris in the Holy Bible that I talked about years in my books. But you can't find it as the Greek Osiris, but you can find it as W-S-A-R in Corinthians, and different ones are Wusar or Usar, and even one of the demons, Uzzah. It's nothing but a form of one of the devils, and later on degraded into Satan in Christianity. It's nothing but a form of Osiris. We have these things, so in so many words, there's nothing new under the sun, only that which is forgotten. And if you find out that these religions are not exclusive, and in that particular thing, that religions thrive on being these sectarian counterparts that grip people, because the people think that this is a unique and exclusive doctrine that no one else ever had. And as a result, you see, this is why we are separated, and no one ever thought to just study the other people's myths. You see what I'm saying? The other people's myths. And I was talking to Brother Ruja today, and I said, I remember I was, when I was at Benedict College down in Columbia, South Carolina, this was in the early 80s, and I used to walk up to this they had a 5 Points in Columbia, South Carolina, and they used to have a record store down there called Papa Jazz. And I used to go in there, and the white boys up in there. There was one white guy that was up in there that was getting a PhD in mythology from the University of South Carolina. And I looked at him in my naivety and my youth, and I was like, what? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, a PhD in mythology. I said, you're not going to ever make any money. Well, of course, I didn't know he could probably, even on the money thing, he could get hired by a major university and just teach mythology. But I didn't realize then how serious mythology was until I started studying mythology years later. And mythology is simple, but it's sublime. And it is the only discipline that you never outgrow. You can always read it to the end of your life, and what it meant one year might vary the next year and the next year and the next year. The woman Wendy O'Flaherty, who wrote several books, she was the erotic aesthetic, Hindu myths, laws of Manu, dreams, illusions, and other reality, evil in Hindu mythology, and just tons of books. The Rig Veda, one translated, and she said she studied the mythology for 30 years. Since she wrote some of her books, and I think she was speaking at this particular time, that was in the 70s, and she was speaking at this particular time in the late 1990s, and said she's gone in and reread these texts, and they mean something totally different than the meanings that she thought when she translated the text in the 1970s for her books. Because we're talking about something that's written from what they call a pre-human intelligence. It's written at a time when we were gods. So therefore, these stories and all these things can turn into never-ending parchments of knowledge and illumination for years and years to come. Years and years to come. So the Christians get mad and the Hebrews get mad when you say Hebrew mythology or Christian mythology, in which it is. There's several, and you got several mythology. You have Raphael Patrick, Hebrew goddess, which is Hebrew mythology. You have You have